Okay, I'll shut off my audio so you don't hear me making a bunch of noise.
All right.
And everything. So.
All right, let's start with prayer quick, and then my dad has something he wants to read, and then I will start Acts chapter 3. Father, we just come before you today. We thank you and we praise you that we have the opportunity, Father, to study your word. Pray, Father, that you would just bless the pieces that you've given me to share. I ask, Father, that you would just let it be meaningful and moving for the hearts of all those who hear it, Father, and that only what you want to come out will come out. We just pray, Father, for this country, for this nation and this world, Father, as things seem to be in a bit of chaos. And we just pray, Father, that you would give spirit of peace and calm and healing. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. I'm coming in now as a watchman. It's one of my jobs. The Old Testament talks about watchmen that stand on the wall and sound warning. Okay? And what I'm going to share with you is something that God gave to a pastor that yesterday I sat at it. I'm not even going to church or any group anymore because I'm not allowed technically. But I listened on the computer to the service, and what the man had to say, I knew was instantly from God. It put chills in our spine, and God gave me more to it, but there's only a part of it I'm allowed to give, so I will give you what I can give. Yesterday, I heard a preacher preach. He spoke as a prophet, and I challenge you to read, please. It's very, very short. There's 2 verses. 2 Chronicles 7, 13, and 14. It doesn't take much, a couple seconds to read. Read it. This needs to be gone out to everybody that believes in our King. Both verses.
Verse 1, 14.
13 and 14. 13 begins it. 14 is the solution for what's going on in our country and the world. It is actually the solution. When my people, this is what it says basically, turn away from me and there is drought upon the land or lack of rain, when locusts swarm and come upon the land, or when there is a plague or epidemics in the land, if my people will humble themselves and turn to me, I will forgive their sins and heal their land. Okay, I'm not certain if you're all aware. I follow the news. Last year, more than half the world suffered higher temperatures than normal and drought. More than half the world was in full drought. Australia burnt. Most of Australia burnt across the whole continent. That's a huge continent, by the way, folks. The fires, they could not contain them. They just took the people off in ships when it got to the coastal towns. Okay? The eastern half of Africa has been eaten alive, in a sense, by locusts. They have swarmed. They say it's the biggest swarm in recorded history that anybody knows of, and it's moving towards the Middle East. It's just totally devouring all of Africa, okay? And they're spraying day and night, yet the spray does not seem to be destroying these creatures. The whole world is suffering from COVID-19, and if that isn't a plague or an epidemic, I don't know what is. This is only the first wave of the storm. It's going to get worse. We will not be able to turn the anger of God away from us because all of us have sinned for a long time. We have not followed him. We have not turned to him. We have not walked with him. But if we'll humble ourselves and if we will cry out to him, he will protect us and our families. That's what he said. That's in everybody's hands. But as a watchman, I needed to tell us we have had our idols. We have had our things. He has become angered over the world. Did you know the world is going into what we call Sabbath rest right now? They said pollution is less. In some areas, they've never seen this. Well, they've seen the sun, but not in years because of the heavy pollution. They can see the sun from the space station. They said the air is clearing up around the planet. We are having tremendous benefit of the whole society being shut down and forced to rest because of this plague. It's really ironic, but we're having a lot of other problems too. God is angry. We're not going to stop his anger. It's a build-up to the final anger, or the raft, as it's called. So that's what I had to share. It's all in Daniel's hands now.
All right, let's go ahead and get started in the first reading through here, chapter 3 of Acts. So just so everyone's aware, once I got really into this, I kind of got a little carried away. So I have 4 pages of notes. We will probably be doing this in 2 parts, which yes, Chris, on that, good news. I hope that you guys will be as excited by what I have found in this passage as I have been. As Megan will tell you, I talked her ear off all day yesterday because I was working on this all day, and I'm super excited by it. So if it does turn into a 2-week thing, then I will probably take next week as well. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to ask Megan to read the first section, which is verses 1 through 11. Since we have the portable microphone, we can do that. Yep.
One day, the hour of prayer, Peter on the temple. Now a man who had been crippled from birth used to be carried there every day by the gate of the temple called the Beautiful Gate to beg from people as they went in. When he saw Peter and John on their way into the temple, he asked for charity, but Peter fixed his eyes on them, as did John also, and said, "Look at us," expecting a gift from them. The man was all attention. And Peter said, "I have no silver or gold, but I will give you in the name of Yeshua of Nazareth, walk." And he grasped him by the right hand and pulled him up. And at once his feet and ankles grew strong. He sprang up and stood on his feet and started to walk. He entered the temple with them, leaping and praising Yah as he went. Everyone saw him walking and was praising Yah. And when they recognized him as the man who used to sit begging at the Beautiful Gate, they were filled with wonder and amazement at all that had happened to him. And as he was clutching Peter and John, all the people came running in astonishment toward them in Solomon's portico, as it is called.
All right. Get the microphone here. Okay. So we have a exciting miracle, but what I found when I started digging into it is there's a lot more here than just what is on the surface. And so I'm going to just kind of dive in as I explored it and as I discovered it. So the first thing I wanted to point out is I've got a lot for just the first verse here. So we've got almost every translation has it as the 3 o'clock, but the actual thing is the 9th hour. So the tradition, the Jewish tradition is to count from 6 a.m. as being the first hour of the day. So you count 9 hours, you get 3 p.m., 3 in the afternoon per our clocks. So that's the tradition. The tradition is that each new day begins at 6 p.m. So you get the first night being 12 hours, and then you get the evening night, and then 6 a.m. being the start of the day. So the Jewish tradition, and here I've got a slide to go along with it, is we have this idea of 3 hours of prayer that occur every day. This is tradition. This is they consider this today, the Orthodox, this is mandated. And so the Orthodox will follow this practice. So at the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, and the 9th hour. So remember, numbers mean things, right? So you have the significance of the power of 3. So this is from tradition from their entire lives. So the fact that Peter and John are here, Kepha and Yohanan are here at the temple, is because that's part of the practice. This was what was done 3 times per day. If they they would go to the temple, and if they couldn't go to the temple, they would stop and pray. Here's an interesting coincidence, probably not a coincidence, but Yeshua, Jesus, died on the 9th hour. Right? It says, and actually this is referenced here in this picture I have here. You have the 3 hours of darkness begin here at 12 noon, at the 3rd or the 6th hour, and then he said, "It's accomplished, it's finished," there at the ninth hour, right? So here we have the ninth hour. It's the evening. This is the end. This is the last time of prayer before technically the day would end. Here are some interesting things. So I did a bit of research on the traditions around these 3 hours of prayer. So per tradition, they believe that Abraham established the first hour of prayer, which was the 9 a.m. hour. They believe Isaac established the second hour of prayer, which would be the noontime prayer, and that Jacob or Israel established the ninth hour. Each of the patriarchs is associated with a specific aspect of the Father. So Abraham was associated with the aspect of love, and we see that in his actions, right? He's the one who argued with God, spare the people of Sodom and Gomorrah if there's but 10, was what he settled on in the end, but 10 innocent will you spare them, right? His was a constant act of love, and he demonstrated that. Isaac was awe being, he was very much so, Isaac was very much so in awe of God, right? And we see that in his life. Jacob demonstrated mercy. He also, the tradition is that he also was believed to have also encapsulated all the other aspects, and that's why he was the one who ended up becoming the establisher of the tribes of the people of Israel, and the nation that they're named after is because he was, for their perspective, he was the embodiment of the whole of all these attributes. So this is very important. This is the ninth hour. This is the hour of mercy, right? So I'm going to get back into that, but this is probably why the beggar was at the gate for this particular time. Yes, he may have been there all day. We don't know for sure, but it's likely that he may very well have only come specifically for this particular prayer time, because being the hour of mercy, everyone would have known that this is the time when people are more likely to give mercy, charity, alms, etc. Right? This was also believed to have been created, this commandment, if you will, of the 3 hours of prayer, to be created during the time of the temple. So I have referenced here Psalm 55. This is the first reference of multiple times of prayer in the day, and you have David in his psalm, and I looked at it and I thought about my usual of saying, oh, let's do the whole thing. Oops, sorry, hold on. I messed something up here. But in this case, I felt like it wasn't as valuable. So, David says, why is this not working? Okay, David says here, he says, evening, morning, and noon I complain and moan, but he hears my voice, right? So this was a psalm of prayer. He's talking about praying. We also have in Daniel, he says that, on learning that the document had been signed, Daniel went home. The windows of the upstairs room were open in the direction of Jerusalem, and there he kneeled down 3 times a day and prayed, giving thanks before his God, just as he had been doing before. And then these men descended on Daniel and found him making requests and pleading before God. So we have this idea of the fact that this practice of praying 3 times a day has been around for a very long time in the history of the people of Israel. So one of the things, though, from tradition, it's believed that Ezra created what's known as the standard prayer. So the basic prayer had always been the Shema. So people would always say, Shema, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, Lord is God. Then the Amidah was established by Ezra, and they believe that was done. The Amidah was established because Ezra was afraid that the people were forgetting their language, because at that point they had been in Babylon for so long. So he established the Amidah. The Amidah captures much of the language of the Hebrew peoples. There are 19 blessings. I've only put up one because 19 is a lot, but I just kind of wanted to share that with you. Here it says, blessed are you, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God the great, the mighty and awesome God, most high, who gives kindness plentifully and creates everything, who recalls kindnesses of the fathers and brings a redeemer to children's children of his name for the sake of his name with love, O King Helper, Savior and Shield. Blessed are you, Lord, Shield of Abraham. Great words, wonderful words. But this begins the tradition of fixed prayers and liturgy that has become a hallmark of the Jewish people. So these are all recited. Apparently, this is recited at every hour of prayer. So to combine all of the prayers together probably takes at least 15 minutes, maybe longer. I would say probably closer to half an hour. So this is a lot of time and the Orthodox Jews have been doing this their whole life. Wherever they're at, will stop and pray. Much like you've seen the Muslims will stop suddenly and drop and throw their rugs on the floor and pray to Mecca. That's where this comes from. That's the origin of that, was that the Jewish people did it long before Islam existed. Okay, so now that we have spent all that time just on the first verse, let's go to the second verse, because this is also, I wanted to kind of create some background for understanding what's happening. So this is where it begins. I began to see as I was studying this that there was a spiritual aspect to this. Whether Luke intended it or not, all the words he chose have double meanings. They can be both a physical description, but they can also be a spiritual description. So when we look at the Greek here, we talk about a man crippled since birth, right? The Greek here is kolos, ek, atos, metir, qualia. So that can be lame from his mother's womb, but it can also mean maimed from the source of his soul, from his original being. So when you think about someone, he probably had maybe a clubbed foot, we're not sure. It doesn't describe anything other than the fact that his legs were weak, likely atrophied. It implies that he'd been carried his entire life. This man had been resigned to a destitute life. He was a man. We know he was a man because the word autos specifically refers to a male that is of majority. So we know he was of the age of majority in the eyes of the people. So he was truly a man, not a boy. He had spent his whole life being carried. He had nothing to look forward to. He likely just sat there and cried out, alms, alms, whatever the common practice was at the time, and waited for people to give him money. And that was how he would pay for food and lodging, is whatever he could get from people. So it likely was a very, very destitute living. So a life, so you can picture, if you put yourself in that person's place, the despair, the loss, the horrible things. He likely had never walked in his entire life. So I had written a whole bunch of stuff about the beautiful gate, and I had done a bunch of research, because that's the next thing here is we talk about this beautiful gate. And I found these great pictures, and then I realized they're all wrong. And the reason I'm gonna say that is because when we go a little bit further along, we see that it says that they met him at the gate, and then they took him into the temple, and then they were in Solomon's portico. Well, let's look at where Solomon's porch is, right? If he was at the beautiful gate, they could not have taken him into the temple with them, and because they would have had to go back out into the outer court of the Gentiles, which doesn't make any sense to be in Solomon's colonnade. So I'm going to throw out what a lot of Christian scholars all say and point to the beautiful gate. I did as much research as I could. In the historical records, nobody has anything listed as the beautiful gate. It could have been the Golden Gate. That seems to be a likely scenario, but the Golden Gate traditionally was where the priests would enter, not the common people. Most likely the common people would have come in over, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, so I'll just pull out a spotlight. Over here, probably where the common people came in. So again, that increases the probability that that was the case. There are names out there for the various gates. The other thing, though, I did find one particular scholar that stated that the term beautiful here really implies not so much beautiful as we think of it. It's more about the spoiling fruit. Because the same term, the same Greek word for beautiful here can also imply overripeness.
Right.
So that's whether or not where they actually came in, I suppose in the scheme of things doesn't really matter. But I think what's key here is they were not entering into this area here, because what we know of this was this area in Herod's temple. This is Herod's temple, let's make that clear. This area here, which is the first entrance, is the woman's court. And I had at first been thinking, oh, well, maybe there's a reason he's out there because women are more likely to get charity. But again, that doesn't fit with why the rest of the story takes place at the Solomon's porch or the portico. Because why would they back out? That's not what the text reads. Okay, so they caught them. He caught them before they entered. Let me get rid of my drawing tool here. Caught them before they entered. Oh, and I did want to show this also. So I found, it took me a bit of work, but I found some pictures of people who basically never walked. So you can kind of think about, picture this. There's no muscle on those legs, no muscles. It's just skin and bone, right? That's it. So here we have, he caught them before they entered the court. They stop to see what, so it's looking at let's go to verse 4 here. They stared straight at him, right? That word caught my attention. And that is, in the Greek, was blepo. And I apologize, I've got a lot of Greek this time because I was really digging deep on this. So this indicates a depth of perception. This was all of his focus. So when Peter fixed his attention upon the crippled man, it would have been an uncomfortably intense stare. He was looking into the man's soul.
Think about it. How often do you look at somebody
Exactly
in the eyes that is crippled or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard Bethany. She was saying that how often do you look at a crippled man who's begging in the eyes? We don't. By nature, we're uncomfortable by the situation. The man probably looked dirty and ragged and with shriveled legs. Most people are going to be so uncomfortable, they're going to shield their eyes and avoid looking at him, or they're going to throw money and hurry away quickly. Peter stops and stares at him, right to the soul, and to get his attention. So now we have the man is looking at them. Now his response, the word here is a peko. It's more of a passive observation. He stopped and looked, but again, he was expecting just to have money thrown to him, right? But Peter had something better than money for this man, right? So this is the wholeness of it. So the word he uses here when he says in the name of the Messiah Yeshua, or the Greek is Christos Jesus de Nazareth. When he says that, he says in the name. The name here is, the word is onama. The onama is, I found it in several places, has fullness of meaning. Onama implies a wholeness of a name. It's everything that it could possibly encompass. It refers to things covered by that name, including feelings stirred up, remembrances. It's a word used in context with a reference to someone or something great, right? So he has, the moment he's inciting the name of our master there, he's also bringing up emotion, he's bringing feeling, he's implying to anyone listening that this name has meaning and power, just through that Greek word that he used. And at this point, right, so now he says to him, he's grabbed him, and he's saying to him, he says the word walk, right? So that almost every translation says walk. And he typically, it also can say rise up and walk, right? So that's another translation I think in there is rise up and walk. So there's actually two Greek words here, and I think it's important that we take a moment and look at them. He says egero kai peripateo. And this is where we get back to the spiritual, because egero can literally refer to calling someone back from death. It's not just rising up. It's literally, he is saying, come back from a state of death and then walk. And the word peripateo can also mean to live. It's the word the Hebrew people used that Greek word when they were referring to living the life of a follower of God. So it meant that you were, as a whole person, living every inch of your existence in following of what is the Torah, the commandments of God. Power in the name, right? So this is a beautiful opportunity, and go for it. Yeah.
What I want to share about that is you are caught in a situation where you know you will never improve. You cannot change. I was told I'd be crippled the rest of my life. I could not walk. I'd done all I could. This man had done all he could and accepted that death state, the death of the idea that he would ever walk, he would ever be whole. He was in death. and in denial. I was healed. I walked. My limb was restored, and it freaked me out. And I remember crying out in pain when it started swinging freely on its own. And then I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, it looks like the other leg. And I put my weight down on it. And if I could stand on it, and I jumped up and down. And then I put my crutches, which I'd worked up to, and walked back to the school. The point is you reach a state of acceptance of your condition to the point that you do not believe you can receive help. And when Peter spoke, he said, wake up. This name has power, and it wants you to come back to life. Have belief again that you can be healed.
So Peter, now that we've established the setting here, he reaches out and touches a man who probably, except for being carried, has never touched. He reaches out, and the word here is piezo. He seized this man by the hand. He didn't just reach out his hand to take his hand. No, he seized him like one who is seizing a criminal to apprehend them, to capture them. He seizes him. And we see again, it says here, he said, it says he pulls him up, he seized him, right? The word up here is again that agaro, which is, there was no delay from the moment he seized him, right? So he's seizing him and he's giving him life by grabbing him. There's no delay. The moment he was seized, the healing began, right? We have it clearly here. It says his instant, and the word instant there implied that there was no hesitation, no delay. It wasn't gradual. It was boom. He seized his hand and it happened. In that moment, it happened. And the term strong here is stereo, made solid, firm, strengthened. So he was made whole. And we're going to get to that again because that word is even more emphasized later. And it says here, the word here in verse 8, it says he sprang up, right? Leaped up. He literally, with Peter's pull, he flew to his feet. That's what's implied. It's literally a literal leaping up off the ground with the pull. And when he came down, it says he sprang up and then stood for a moment, right? And others just say stood, right? But the word is histemi, make firm, to fix, to set in place, immovable, a foundation of a building, one who does not waver or hesitate. So in that moment, he's pulled, leaps to his feet as he's pulled. And when he comes down, he lands as a man with a foundation. And then he was ready to truly live. It says he walked, again, peripateo. Now they entered the temple. The word here is aiser kome, which can be to enter, but it can also mean to begin to be, to come into life. It says then that he went with them, walking and leaping. The word leaping here is a different word than the word that was used earlier. This one is halomi, and it means gushing water. So you can think of him as like a man, like a leaping stream from a fountain, right? This man could not contain himself. It was pouring out of him. And it says he was praising God, aineo, which means also implies promising, making vows, praising, extolation, recommending someone. So this man was now in that moment. Just picture, this is so instantaneous. This all happens in a matter of seconds. He goes from a man who might as well be dead to pouring life out to everyone around him. And he has already by this point captured the attention of everybody in the outer courtyard. We know the outer temple was the temple of the court of the Gentiles, and likely prior to the services beginning, everyone was probably gathered there waiting for the priest to be ready to begin. So he has drawn everyone's attention through his commotion. And the word used here that refers to people's recognizing or hearing him, they recognized him as the same man, is horeo, which is perception, taking heed, seeing with both eyes and mind. So this wasn't just a casual, oh, somebody's making a noise in the background. This was everybody's attention was drawn. It was not just a casual thing. They recognized him, right? Verse 10, they recognized him as the same man. He must have been there every day for years for everyone to have recognized him. And then it says that they were amazed and confounded. Others had amazed and wondered. So the two words here are thambos, which is amazement, but it also can mean rendered immovable, right? So this is when you're struck dumb, basically, by something that has happened. The other word is ecstasis, which is something, it's an event that throws the mind out of its normal state, casting down of a thing from its proper place, but it can also mean fear and wonder, right? So these people could not process what had happened in this instant because they had expectations of who this man was. He was probably still in rags, so there was no doubt that it was the same man. And so they didn't know how to respond to it at this point. So now so the people have been drawn. They have realized what's happening to some extent. This man is clinging to Peter and John, it says. The term here is krateo, holding fast, like the grip of death, as though he was afraid should he let Peter go, it might all end abruptly. So this event was so amazing that the people literally ran to see. And the Solomon's portico, just as a kind of a side note, the Solomon's portico was the only item that remained from the original temple of Solomon. It was the only thing not destroyed with the destruction of the first temple. I found that when doing some research on it. Unfortunately, it was destroyed with the second destruction of the temple, so we only have models of what people think it looked like based off of other porticos that exist out there. So we don't know for sure. So we have this, I have this picture here of the portico, but nobody knows for sure what it is. They can only kind of guess based on historical. And just for reference, I didn't talk about this earlier, but these are the gates. This is the Golden Gate. Was walled up. Today, it still exists. It was walled up, or at least they think this was the Golden Gate, but it was walled up by the during the medieval era, is what they believe. So okay, so we've got all of that. Yeah, so they come running. Okay, all right. That's the first part of chapter 3. Can I get someone, maybe Joan, would you like to read verses 12 through 18 for us?
12 through 18.
Yep.
Okay, got it. And when Peter saw it was addressed the people, men of Israel, why do you wonder at this? Or why do you stare at us as though by our own power or pity that we have made him walk? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the God of our fathers, glorified his servant, Jesus, whom he delivered over and denied in the presence of Pilate, and when he decided to release him. But you denied the holy and righteous one, and asked for a murderer to be granted to you, and you killed the author of life, who God raised from the dead, to this we are witness, and his name, by the faith in his name, has made this man strong, whom you see and know in faith that is through Jesus, has given to man this perfect health in the presence of all. And now, brethren, I know that you acted ignorant, as did also your rulers, but the God foretold by the mouth of all the prophets that this Jesus would suffer his through fulfillment.
Okay, thank you. So Peter answers the question that was probably being whispered by the crowd. The term here, when he says amazed, refers to thaumazo, which is to marvel or wonder at. What's interesting here is when I looked at the Greek, we have Peter saying, why do you stare at us? But he uses the Greek word ego, which I'm sure all of you know, which means I. There's no other translation for the word ego in there. It means I, me, myself. So Peter is really saying, why do you stare at me? And I got to thinking that maybe in reality, the man was probably clinging more to Peter than to John at this point. John was almost more in the background of the situation. Because it was Peter who spoke the words, Peter who sees the man, Peter whose the healing power was performed through. His words were also likely intended for the healed beggar or the man, right? So if you think about it, in this case, yes, the beggar had heard the words that Peter had said, but he was probably still, as we tend to do, focused on the man who was in front of him. The power that he references here is dynamis. It's an inherent power or virtue. So that's why when he says, he's saying that, through some power, godliness of our own. The other word here is eusebia, which is reverence or piety or godliness. So he's trying to make it very clear that this is not about him. Peter also wanted to make it clear that what had happened was from the same God that these people were here to worship, right? So he says, references this is referenced throughout the Old Testament, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of our fathers. That our again is ego. He's again saying of my father, the God of my fathers. He's establishing himself as a son of Abraham. It's not a plural word. When he talks about Yeshua here, the term pais is used, which is oftentimes translated servant, but it can also mean a slave, and a king's attendant, right? So it's definitely got a deeper meaning. So Peter here, just like in the previous chapter, he is establishing and reminding the people first who Yeshua was and their part in his death. Paradidomi, to give over, to betray, to permit, can also be the ripeness of fruit, interestingly. Arneome, to deny, but can also mean to refuse to accept, right? So they betrayed, basically he's saying to them, you betrayed this man, you denied him, you refused to accept him before Pilate. And he reminds them also the fact that Pilate had attempted to release him. And the word here is apolio, which means to set free, but it also was a Greek word that meant to divorce or repudiate, right? Remember, Pilate said he washed his hands of everything. So, Peter's reminding them, Pilate washed his hands of this whole scenario. And that's why he comes back to this whole point. He repeats the idea that the people not only denied him, but then after all of this, he says, you denied the Holy One, right? The holy and righteous. This is hagios, which means one worthy of veneration. It's exclusively belonging to God. This Greek word would have only been used in reference to God, or something belonging to God. So, you might refer to the altar in the temple as being hagios. So he's applying the same title to Yeshua, to Jesus. And righteous, which in one version here we have translated as innocent one, is dikaios, or dikaios. One who observes divine laws, keeps all the commandments, and is innocent, right? So this word literally can only ever be applied to Jesus, to Yeshua. There's no other who meets or can have this title. They might attempt to give it to someone else, but really in truth, he would be the only one that could hold that dikaios, that Greek word, as a title. And then in 15 it says you killed the author of life, right? So this one, it's a short thing, but there's a lot here. Apakteino also means destroy, extinguish, abolish, right? So that it's a strong word he's using here. Archikos, prince, author, the lead, the predecessor, the pioneer. He's saying that it can also mean author. This is a word that also could be implied to mean the first fruit, because it's someone who comes before. So And then this last word here is Zoa, which means every living soul. So he's basically saying that this man came as the prince or the leader. He's attributing and claiming that Yeshua is God, it's Yahweh, or the one above. He's not again, he is while he has called him the servant, he's also saying what we need to remember, which is that Yeshua was God. The words he used here, there can be no ambiguity. But God raised him from the dead. He used the same word here regarding the resurrection as he used on the beggar. So he's again saying that not only was Yeshua raised to life, but the man, the beggar standing next to him, would have realized that he has been raised to life. Right? He says, of this we are witnesses. This is validity. He's giving validity to all this by claiming legal status. The term witness here is absolutely a legal term, and he is saying, by our witness, by my witness, I am saying legally that this took place.
Earlier, Daniel was sharing about the Greek words and how Peter addressed the people and basically made it clear to them that he was a part of Israel too. He had to do that because of the fact that the people considered the Galileans to be a mixed half-breed society, and therefore they could, by their priests and that of the temple and the different things that were said, they had a natural wall to listening and that to them. And he said, brethren, I am an Israeli. I am a part of the family of Abraham. I am that. And when he was describing all that back there. And so therefore, you should and better listen to what I have to share with you. This is what has happened.
Peter here then goes on to give credit to the power of Yeshua's name. The word here, pistis, is used for faithfulness or reliable character. It can also mean belief, right? So he's saying that through trust in this name. He's saying specifically, though, that the power comes through belief in the name of Yeshua and the wholeness thereof, right? So remember I mentioned that word onama from earlier. Again, that's the word he's using here. So he's implying to all the people here, again, that this name is a whole encompassing fullness, that it has power to it. So this would have, many of these people likely did witness his power and witness his miracles, because this is only, keep in mind, this is only a couple months after Passover at this point. So the crucifixion would have taken place, and his miracles peaked just prior to his death. We have most of the stuff took place in that last 6 months of his life. So this healing, and this is what I was implying really from verse 1, basically going forward, is that this healing is more than just the man's legs, right? Because he says he's given perfect healing. Peter is suggesting that the man may have appeared sickly, but more than that, it's the full circle. His soul, his heart, his being has been restored to perfect health. Holocleria is the word here for perfect healing. This is the wholeness. It means completeness. This man went from being incomplete to now being complete. It's a transition, but it's a very significant difference. But what's interesting here is Peter gives the people a bit of an out. He said he gives them the excuse of ignorance. But one of the things to remember here is that everybody standing here who is in this temple would most likely have known the Torah, and the Torah makes it very clear that even ignorance is still a sin. There is no, just because you are ignorant does not mean that you are not guilty. And that's part of the practice of the forgiveness of sins through the sacrifices, was to achieve cleanliness, but it was also for the ignorant sins, because those are the ones that could be most easily forgiven. The intentional sins, forgiveness for intentional sins was not easily achieved. according to the Old Testament law.
No, it was not easily achieved, and it was very difficult. And no man could be put to death without the witness of two people. That's why we have the two witnesses in the last day. The two witnesses tie all together. Even in our judicial system, we're supposed to have two reliable witnesses. Well, there were no reliable witnesses. The witnesses contradicted each other. And the people that were there went ahead and, of course, cried, "Crucify."
So in verse 18, Peter again, and this should sound familiar because we just covered this 2 weeks ago, Peter again points out that this is all according to God's plan. And here, so it's typically, this is commonly translated as suffering, right? That the prophets believed that he would suffer and die. What's interesting, though, is the word that he uses. We can kind of throw that out a little bit because the word he uses here is pasco. Pasco can be both positive and negative. Basically, what he's saying is it's not just suffering that was foretold; it was all that he experienced. Everything that took place was foretold. That's what he's saying. He's not just saying that Messiah would die, that Christ would suffer. He's also saying all the things that he experienced were foretold. So he's certainly making a statement here, a much larger statement than how it's traditionally translated and taught. All right, Mom, would you mind reading the last 19 to the end?
Sounds good. Therefore repent and turn to God so that your sins may be erased, that times of refreshing may come from the Lord's presence, and he may send the Messiah appointed in advance for you, that is, Yeshua. He has to remain in heaven until the time comes for restoring everything, as God said long ago when he spoke through the holy prophets. Moses himself said, Adonai will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brothers. You are to listen to everything he tells you. Everyone who fails to listen to that prophet will be removed from the people and destroyed. Indeed, all the prophets announced these days, starting with Samuel and continuing through all who followed. You are the sons of the prophets, and you are included in the covenant which God made with our fathers when he said to Abraham, by your seed will all the families of the earth be blessed. So it is to you first that God has sent his servant, whom he has raised up, so that he might bless you by turning each one of you from your evil ways.
Thank you very much. All right. So Peter gives an answer to all this speech, right? So he's basically he's kind of chided them quite a bit. Now he gives them an answer. It's the moment they've all experienced. It's what they've been waiting for is where every speech has to have a conclusion. So he uses the words here. He talks about repenting and turning. He uses two words, metanoeo, which means to change one's mind, typically used for repent. It also can mean to amend one's past sins. Kai epistrepho, to turn back or to turn to worship, right? So sin's not just forgiven, and then he says here, exalepho, meaning to be washed completely, but can also mean obliterated, erased, right? But he's giving them a promise that is much more complete than what they have ever heard before. Because from the scripture, or from the Torah, from the scriptures as they have it, sin is it's a temporary respite. It's not forgotten, but it can be covered. Here he's saying that if you will repent and turn to God in these ways, turn back, amend your past sins, that they can be completely obliterated, removed from you. The sin will not be there. And then he goes on in verse 20. But did somebody have something add? Don't want to.
No, I just amend it.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch it. And he's suggesting here that in verse 20 that being in God's presence without repentance is far from pleasant, right? So he says here that after you've done this, right? So this is a so that. So if you don't do these things to go to his presence, you won't be refreshed, right? So, but this idea here, this refreshing is like water, right? It's hearkening back to the stone in the wilderness. If you think about it, right? All these people know the story of the stone in the wilderness, the tradition being that that was the Messiah following after them that gave them the water. So he's tying it back to this idea of refreshing, of the when we are thirsty, God, it can be a refreshing thing to be before him. And that's, instead of restoring, refreshing is another word that translation there. Now he has to explain something to them, and this is something I think is important here, is that why don't they see Yeshua, right? So he's gotten done talking about the fact of Yeshua being raised from the dead, right? And he's saying, I'm a witness to this. This happened, whether you believe it or not. Well, as any of us would do in the same position, is if it were to happen today, we would say, well, if he rose from the dead, then where is he, right? So it was very important that Peter then had to come back and say and point out the fact that there is a reason why he's not there. That this idea that he had to remain in heaven until the time come for restoration. The idea that he's referencing here is the idea of a theocracy. So this restoration he's talking about, he's saying that in this is he's appealing to the people who are looking for the Messiah to rule. He's saying that that is what will come when the time is right. That this is what has been spoken of by the prophets. That this idea that he will come and there will have the perfect world. This word was often used to reference the Garden of Eden as being the perfect place, a utopia. And he points out that this was already spoken of by the prophets. So we have Deuteronomy 18 here, and I went ahead and pulled this up. So Dad, why don't you read this for us?
The whole thing?
Yeah. So Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 19, it covers both references that Peter makes here.
When you enter the land Adonai your God has given you, you are not to learn how to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There must not be found among you anyone who makes a son or daughter pass through fire, a diviner, a soothsayer, an enchanter, a sorceress, a spellcaster, a consulter of ghosts, or spirits, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is detestable to Adonai because of these abominations. Adonai your God is driving them out ahead of you. You must be wholehearted with Adonai your God. For these nations which are about to dispossess, listen to these soothsayers, diviners, but you, Adonai your God, does not allow you to do this. Adonai will raise up for you a prophet like me from among yourselves, from your own kinsmen, and you are to pay attention to him, just as when you were assembled at Horeb and requested Adonai your God, don't let me hear the voice of Adonai my God anymore, or let me see this great fire ever again. If I do, I will die. On that occasion, Adonai said to me, they're right in what they're saying. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kinsmen. I will put my words in his mouth, and he'll tell them everything I order him. Whoever doesn't listen to my words, which he will speak in my name, will have to account for himself to me.
Here. Not just that the prophets foretold this, he's also reminding the people that their ancestors had no longer wanted to hear God's voice for themselves. The more, this is much more in this reference here, he says about he quotes it as with a little bit of his own words here, that they'll be removed from the people and destroyed. The word destroyed here is much more extreme than just the sins being washed away. This is just utter absolute obliteration. There's no coming back from this. And so he is really, really laying down the gauntlet here by saying that if you aren't going to listen to me, if you aren't going to listen to the prophet that you killed, the one who was foretold, then there is no hope for you. So, you know, he's really setting this stage down. And again, he's saying, he's also coming back to what my dad mentioned before, again, about the witnesses, right? He's giving two voices. So he's quoting Moses, and then he's stating that Samuel said the same thing, as well as other prophets, right? So he's giving two voices, two witnesses. He's setting evidence. He's creating a case for this belief. And then we're reminded again that they are the descendants of those whom Moses spoke to, as well as the prophets, right? He says, you are the sons of the prophets. You are included in the covenant of our fathers when he said to Abraham, by your seed will all the families of the earth be blessed. He is bringing home this idea that the blessing was promised by God, and it includes the whole earth, not just the people of Israel. And so it is that the blessing came first in the form of Yeshua, before it will come out to the whole world. Peter is really wanting them to understand that this is their opportunity, that they have been given a witness to things that had been foretold, that had been so much looked forward to, and reminding them that this is their opportunity to have that blessing, if they will turn from their evil ways, right? Yeah, go for it.
In some places I've been, there's been a morning and evening newspaper. The morning newspaper had the latest news. And so the people that took that one knew what was going on. Well, the ones in the evening found out just before they went to bed what was going on. So the people that had it in the morning had a full idea of all the disasters or blessings that were coming, where the people in the afternoon found out later. So I've always thought I want to be the one who received the newspaper in the morning and not the afternoon, because I want to be involved in the morning. And we all have light to walk in. We have a short period of time while that light is there before the light will be gone.
And that actually brings me to the end of chapter 3 and all of my notes with 3 minutes to spare. So are there any questions or comments from anyone on the, anyone either in the room or on the meeting?
No, how is everybody doing?
Good. Let's wrap up with prayer first, though, and then we can chat a little bit. All right, Dad, would you like to close this?
I'll be in there, our Father, our beloved King and God, who watches over us for good, who loves us with a love that we cannot comprehend, and who has pre-planned, prepared, paved the way, told us thousands of years ago what would happen if certain conditions came. We thank you for this time of study. We ask that you watch over each family, that you help us all to walk in your light, to bring the good news to others, to smile, encourage, bless, for many are perishing around us, and they may not be here tomorrow. We thank you, Father, for your love. In the name of Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach, in the name of the one that in this society they call Jesus Christ. Amen.